Hi, this is Adam here, and today I'm going to show you how to do manual drum editing in Pro Tools. There are many ways you can edit drums in Pro Tools. The most common method usually is with Beat Detective, which is more automated, where it selects transients for you and puts them to the grid and that sort of thing. But the method I learned, specifically from my teacher Dave Pytek, I like a lot better because I feel like it's more reliable and I feel like it's more accurate. I feel like there's less work I have to do as well. So that's the method I'm going to show you today. So these are some drum tracks I have here from a client of mine, actually. His name is Bobby, and he's a really good drummer and a good engineer as well. And this is actually from a session I did some work for him, and I thought this was a great example because it's a pretty simple drum beat. I'll play a little bit for you here. I just have a drum mix going already and just a click track, but I'm going to mute the click for now. Out of the click, he's pretty close. But if we zoom in here, you can see that, he's a human being, so obviously he wasn't exactly on the grid, and that's totally fine. But in this case, we want to tighten it up to be to the grid using the kick and snare as a reference, and we're going to leave the rest alone for the most part. We'll quantize some toms a little bit later, but we're just going to focus on the kick and snare. So first thing you want to do is you want to group your tracks. So I'm going to select all my drum tracks, and I'm going to do Control or Command G. It's going to bring up the group window. I'm going to select Edit because I just want to do the edit. I don't want it to change anything when I select any faders, and I'm going to call this Drum Edit. Okay, so now when I select one clip, it selects all of them. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our zoom settings are set. So over here, there are these numbers that represent zoom settings. This is definitely essential for this kind of editing. The way I set this is I use the magnifying glass, and I'm going to zoom in onto one of the transients until I'm at sample level. And I'll show you what that looks like. So just keep zooming in. And now we're at sample level. When you get to this point, you're going to zoom out once. And I'm going to use, and while I have this cursor with the magnifying glass tool open, I'm going to hold Alt or Option, and I'm going to click, and that's going to zoom me out. So what you want to do for the first zoom setting, which would be 5, you want to zoom all the way into sample level, and then when you get there, you want to zoom out once. That's going to be 5. You're going to click and hold 5, and click Save Zoom Preset. Then you're going to zoom out 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and that's going to be 4. And then you're just going to do intervals of 3 up for the next 3 numbers. So 1, 2, 3, that'll be 3. 1, 2, 3, that'll be 2. 1, 2, 3, that'll be 1. To be honest with you, I only really use 3 and 5. It's your preference how big you want the zooming to be. You can always hold Alt and scroll with your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. That's what I do a lot of time when I'm doing editing. But in this particular case, I use the zoom settings. And the way you're going to access these are using the number keys on your keyboard above the letters. So when I press 5 on my keyboard now, 4, 3, 2, 1, it zooms in. This is essential because you're going to want to have those shortcuts available because you're going to be using the shortcuts on the keyboard to do this very quickly. Also should be noted that you want to keep this, I think it's called Command Key Focus. It's this little icon that when it's lit, it enables certain shortcuts, and when it's not lit, I think when it's not lit, you actually can't use the shortcut. So I'm pressing 5 right now, and nothing's happening. But when I select it, now it's zooming in. So make sure that's on. Next thing you want to make sure is that you have tab transient on, and that just allows that when you make sure you're back in the Smart tool before you do anything here. That's going to make sure that when you are in the edit window and you click and you hit tab, it's going to tab to the nearest transient available. So make sure that's on. The other thing to make sure before you start, now you don't have to do this, but I recommend doing this, is to create a duplicate playlist of the tracks you're about to edit because, we all screw up sometimes, and it's also good to have a reference of the original track where, if you screw up or maybe you want to have the original performance and you don't want to import the clips again, it's just a lot easier to do this before you start and create a duplicate playlist instead of having to deal with that later. So because these are grouped, if I click down the playlist arrow and I click duplicate, it's going to do it for all of them. And now, if I do crazy editing to this, and I screw up, I mean, I can, you know, Control Z, but let's just say I screwed up and I saved it and I go, oh no, I can click back and go to the original, and there it is. You know, and if I really wanted, I could just import, you know, that up into the old one or the new one. So make sure that's done. I also like to color these a different color to signify what I'm working with. So I'm going to just select these, and I'm going to make these a little darker orange. Oh, actually, no, I didn't do that right. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so now I know when I'm looking at the dark orange, I'm looking at my edit group, and I'm looking at the light orange. If I decide to pull it up, I'm looking at my original takes. So that's convenient. Okay, cool. So, I also have this signified by the .01. I like to rename this as well. I use batch rename to do that. And just type in whatever you want to find and replace it with. I just want to call it edit, so now they're all called edit instead of .01. It's a little more straightforward. And now we're ready to begin. So basically, we're going to be doing a really repetitive movement with our shortcuts, making sure command key focus is enabled. And if you're wondering, I'm zooming in by holding Alt or Option and scrolling with my mouse wheel in and out to do that. And then I hold Shift and scroll with the mouse wheel to scroll with that. So, at least on Windows. I use Alt and Shift or Option for Mac. So what you're going to do, basically, this is sort of the dance of the editing method. You're going to tab a transient. You're going to zoom in with the 5 setting, but I'm going to press 5 on the keyboard, and it's going to bring me in. And something to note as well, when tab a transient, it's pretty darn close. I mean, it's going to tab, but a lot of times when you're tabbing, it's not going to be exactly on. So if you zoom in here, you can see it totally. That one was actually good, but sometimes you'll tab, and it'll be like, you know, a little like that maybe, or a little too late or early, whatever. So if that happens, which it's going to, you're going to have to manually click where the transient begins to ensure that your splitting is accurate. So anyway, what you're going to do is you're going to tab transient. You're going to zoom in with 5. You're going to make sure that that cursor is right on the transient. And then you're going to split the clip right there using Command or Control E. You're going to click the clip, and you're going to hold Command or Control 0. But I'm also, just to note, I'm pressing 0 on the numeric keypad, not the numbers above the keyboard, but 0 on to the right of the alphabet, I guess. The zoom settings are above the keyboard, just to make that clear, but the 0 for the quantization command is going to be on the numeric keypad. So anyway, we've tabbed, we've split. I'm going to click this, I'm going to Command 0, and that command is going to move this clip to the nearest grid. Now, let's make sure that we're also in the appropriate subdivision. I'm going to use 16th notes because he played mostly 8th notes here, but there was a couple times when he played some fills or some other notes that he played some 16th notes, so that's what we're going to use. So we tabbed, we made sure our cursor was correct, we split the clip, we clicked this, and now when I do Control 0, it just moved that clip to the nearest transient. Because we cut it right at the transient, it's now exactly on the grid where it needs to be. And then we're going to zoom out using, so let's say we were zoomed in with 5. I'm going to press 3, zoom out, and just click tab and go to the next one. Now sometimes when you tab, it's not going to go right to the next one. You might have to hit tab a couple times. That's pretty normal. So tab, 5, make sure our cursor's right, split, click on that, Control 0, zoom out, go to the next one. And that's pretty much it. And you're just doing that over and over and over. And once you get good at it and you get used to it, you can do this pretty fast. You know, when I first did it, it kind of took me a few minutes to get the hang of it. But after a while, it just, like I said, it becomes a dance, as Dave Pytek would say. My teacher, Dave Pytek. So, once again, tab, zoom in using the 5 setting, split, click, quantize, zoom out. And we're using the kick and snare as a reference for this. So now here's a tom hit, but I'm going to do the same thing. back to that kick and snare. And that's all you're gonna do. So I'm gonna do the rest of this, and I'll come back when I've done that. Okay, so I just got done with this section here, and now every kick and snare hit should be exactly to the grid. So you can see the grid lines here, and every kick and snare hit, and in those tom hits even, right here. The floor, I think he played one of the rack toms, are all to the grid. So now if I play this with the click, every hit will be in time. Now, granted, there are some gaps here because we've actually moved the clips, but we're going to address that in a second here. We're going to fill those gaps and crossfade it using Beat Detective to automate it. But let's go ahead and give this a play and make sure that this is in time. So that's in time. Now, I didn't quantize any of the hi-hat. There actually was a hi-hat track here. I just didn't want to use it. I just tried to keep this simple. If you really wanted to, you could go in and just do the same thing where you would just zoom in on those hi-hat transients. I mean, you could use the overhead in this case and move those over as well if you wanted to be super tight. But a lot of time, if the drummer is really good, I don't really need to do that. But you can see that just tighten that up even more. So in this case, I'm not going to do that, just to keep it simple. But now we've done our editing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to select all of this. I'm going to do Control or Command 8, which is going to pull up Beat Detective. And make sure fill and crossfades on 5 milliseconds. You don't need to worry about any of this. This is only if you're using this to automate the splitting of the clips and the quantizing, but since we're not doing that, we're just doing the edit smoothing. This is irrelevant, so don't worry about that. Just make sure you click edit smoothing, fill and crossfades on, and it's 5 milliseconds, and you've selected this, and hit smooth, and now you can see it just filled and selected that. Now, if you have, by accident, a little fade in there and you try to do it, it'll say this: the selection must not contain crossfades. Instead of having to search this entire clip or whatever to find the fade, the easiest thing to do in that case would be to go to Edit, Fades, Delete. And now the gaps are filled, but all the fades are gone now. So I'm just going to undo that really quick and just do it again. Okay. So now what's happened is all those little gaps between, those little spaces between the clips we moved around have been filled. Now, a lot of time, if your drummer is, was playing very good to begin with, you don't have to really do any work here. That's a screw up right there. I'll have to fix that. But sometimes, it's not perfect, and it will place the fades at weird points, and you'll have little artifacts, which are basically just little glitchy sounding things, because what's happening is it's trying to continue the audio from where the clip originally was, but since you've moved the clip, like for example here, if it keeps going, you see now it's starting to, this is where the original hit was when we moved it to the right. So it's trying, sometimes it'll be like that and you'll hear a weird noise because it's playing both the previous clip and the moved one. Like, you actually couldn't hear it that time, but if you see this, you want to just move the crossfade accordingly where it's not showing that, where it's just showing the new transient. So sometimes I'll go through, I used to go through like really analytically and check every single one. I actually don't think it's necessary anymore unless the performance was already bad to begin with. Now, look, you occasionally get something like this where it's a little too close to the transient. You just move it over, no big deal. But typically I just hit play and listen, and if I hear it, I'll know. So let's check this out. Sounds pretty good to me. And off glance, I don't see any weird fades. I think it did a pretty good job. There's nothing wrong with going and looking through if you really want to be thorough, but I feel like I've spent a lot of unnecessary time doing that, and as long as you're, splitting your clips correctly to begin with, then you should be fine. So that's basically that. Now if we play this with the click, not only is it in time, but there's no gaps, and it sounds like a smooth, solid drum performance. The only one I wanted to show you otherwise was I just wanted to show you how to do some fills, because you look at the times like these where you have a regular kick snare, which is pretty simple, but then you get to tom fills and flams and that sort of thing. It's going to get a little hairy. So, for example, right here, this is a snare flam. So you don't need to do both of these, just the first one. And then here we have the toms. This is a fill he does right here. But you do the same thing. Now, if you want to, some people like to leave tom fills alone. So what you could do is you could just select the beginning of the fill and then just kind of move the entire fill where it needs to be. So if I did that, because he played already pretty good, if you want to keep it more loose and natural, that's cool. But in this case, if we wanted to do every single hit, we would do the same thing, but now we're just moving for this particular fill. We're quantizing more than just the kick and the snare. We're doing the toms now, so we're just doing the exact same thing. We're tabbing transient, finding those hits, and moving them over where they need to go. See, that one's so close I wouldn't even bother with that. I would just leave that alone. So now if we listen to that, that'll probably sound a lot tighter. A lot tighter. So that's all I wanted to show you there. And then we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to select all that, beat detected with Command 8 or Control 8, smooth it out, take a listen. I didn't hear any weird pops or clicks, so I'm assuming this looks good. At a glance, this looks good. And then when you're all done, once you've, this is just sections of a song, for example, but, you'll be doing an entire song worth of fills and beats and whatnot. Once you're all done, you select all the clips, and then you would go to Edit, Consolidate Clip, which will print this as one clip, where it will just, instead of having a bunch of fades and smooth, all that stuff, it just becomes one clip. And again, actually, I like to duplicate this again in case I find an issue, because if I were to just print this as is, and then I'm listening back and I hear something, I can't go back and adjust a fade. I'd have to completely redo the edit, which would just be an unnecessary amount of time. So what I would do is duplicate it again, and you can call this whatever you want. I'm just going to call this like final or something, or FNL is an abbreviation. And now I know this is the final drum edit. So, in this playlist at least. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to do Edit, Consolidate Clip. The shortcut is Alt-Shift-3 in Windows or Command-Shift-3. I'm going to use the shortcut. And now the clip is whole again. And this is what I would do when I send my client a final drum edit. So that way, if somebody wants to just, if you're sending tracks to be mixed or something, you wouldn't send them a bunch of clips like that. You would send them one printed clip so they can just put it into their session, and it'll just play right with the click. So. And that is how you do manual drum editing in Pro Tools.